So I've been games mastering for over 40 years, and in that time I've learned a lot, as you can imagine. I've developed a philosophy of gaming that really works for me. It's not for everybody. No system is for everybody, no game is for everybody, and certainly no RPG philosophy is for everybody. But I thought that I would compile a list of some of the things I've learned over the past lifetime of games mastering and share them with you, and see if they're of some value to you. I thought that might be kind of cool to do. So without further ado, here are some of my thoughts on GMing and how to make your tabletop role-playing games better for both you and your players. So before we begin, I want to let you guys know that I will actually be appearing at GenCon this year, 2023. I'm going to be a special guest of Columbia Games, so you can find me at their booth. I'll be there from the Thursday to the Sunday. And yeah, really looking forward to it. I've never been to Gen Con before, so I'm very excited to see it and to participate in all the various things. So if you guys are going to be there, then by all means do come by the Columbia Games booth, and I'll be there with all my Me, Myself, and I stuff set up, or some of it anyway. So it would be great to meet you and talk to you and get to know you and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Columbia Games booth at Gen Con 2023. So if there's one universal rule for GMing role-playing games, it's that there are no universal rules for GMing role-playing games. Everything is totally different and based on the different contexts. So, it depends on the composition of your table, it depends on the game system, on the genre, on the setting, on the mood of people, on whether or not they're hungry or not. There's so many things that come into play. So there's no one comprehensive set of GMing principles that's going to apply to everybody. But over the past 40 years, I have learned a few things that more often than not are helpful to me when I'm running a game, regardless of system or setting. These are very generalized thoughts that I wouldn't even call them tips necessarily. They're more just illuminations of my process of the things I consider when I'm running various games. So these are not commandments from God brought down to say, this is how you must run your games. Not at all. These are just some thoughts that have worked for me in the past, and so I thought I'd share them with you, and hopefully you can get some value out of them. These thoughts are also presented in no particular order, so it's not like number 1 is more important than number 5 or something like that. But anyway, here they are, my thoughts on what has made my games better. So this one is really important. There should always be an active conflict for the player characters in play. Now, why do I say this? Because conflict is the core of any game. If you do not have conflict in your game, it means that nothing's going on. Have you ever been at a game as a player where you're sitting around and you're really bored because nothing seems to be happening? There's a lot of nothing going on. Well, that's probably because there's no situations that are coming into conflict with the player character's objectives. So this is really, really key. In order for there to be conflict, which drives the action, right? Drives and propels the drama, if you will. In order for there to be conflict, there has to be character objectives. Each player character has to want something. That could be really complicated, like I'm trying to scheme my way into the palace and eventually overthrow the king that butchered my family 30 years ago. Or it could be something as simple as, I need money. I'm going to go in this dungeon to get rich. That's an objective, and it's a perfectly valid objective. But if the player characters do not have objectives, if they don't want anything, if they don't have any goals, then there is no way for the GM to challenge those goals. Basically, my philosophy is the job of a GM is to provide obstacles for the player characters for them to overcome. Because by overcoming the obstacles, they resolve conflicts. And that's the heart of all action, of all drama. I don't mean action like an action movie action. I mean like the stuff that propels the narrative forward. Even if you're doing like a West Marches hex crawl kind of thing, there's still the forward momentum that you want your characters to feel like they're accomplishing something. They're trying to achieve something. How do you ensure you do this? Well, a lot of people talk about session 0 being really important, and I agree with them. I think session 0 is really important. Session 0 is before you actually start the campaign. You sit down and you talk about the sort of vision you have for the campaign or the style that you have for the campaign. That's one thing. But the other thing you have to do is whatever player characters are created, it's contingent upon the GM, I feel, or at least it has been contingent upon me in my games, to ensure that each character has to have some kind of motivation, has to have some sort of objective, has to have something they want to accomplish, to possess. It doesn't matter what it is. They just have to want something. Because without that, I cannot throw obstacles in their way, and therefore, there's no conflict. So this tip, if you will, is always ensure that there is an active conflict going on in any given scene. This leads into my next point, which is sort of an expansion on the previous one, which is my philosophy of running a game is basically the characters push on the world and the world pushes back somewhere else. It's a constant push and pull. It's a constant action and reaction. So what this does, it creates a feeling of a living world that is both active in the background, but also is responding to what the player characters are doing. That's really key in my philosophy. I always want to make sure that the characters feel that they have the ability to try and change the status quo. Now, notice I said try. The characters have the ability to try to change the status quo, which that's where the game system comes in, right? It's not that the characters can just suddenly do whatever they want and automatically succeed. No, they have to try. They have to overcome the obstacles by pursuing their objectives, and therefore, by that conflict that's being generated, they change the status quo and they roll dice while they do it to ensure that their characters actually do it. The world pushes here and they push back and vice versa. So something as simple as if the characters are part of a faction, let's say they're City Watch, okay? Something where they're working for the City Watch for whatever reason. And they, in the course of their adventure, they wind up maybe accidentally killing off a high-ranking member of the local thieves guild. Well, that's now the world is going to push back. Now I know that the NPCs involved in this, which are like the thieves guild leader and the various thieves and such, they are now going to push back. They're now going to respond to what the characters just did. And that could look like a million different things. That could happen in a million different ways. But whatever happens, the world is going to respond to what the characters do. And that will give a feeling of a living, breathing world that's constantly in motion. And it doesn't have to take a lot of work on the part of the GM either. You don't have to really do a lot to that. The only thing you have to do is to know your NPCs, know what they want, and know what they're willing to do in order to get what they want. And then throw them in the player character's path, basically. Again, I'm talking in generalities here because, I'm talking about an overall philosophy of things rather than any specific examples. The world is going to respond to what the players do. When the players push in the world pushes back. Now, the thing about constant conflict in order to keep the action going is that you don't want to overdo it. There is a lot to be said for downtime. Downtime is where there's no active conflict right in that exact moment. Now, that's important for character development things. Like if we're talking about something like Pathfinder, downtime is a time where characters can swap out various feats and things like that. I think I'm no expert on Pathfinder, but I think stuff like that happens. But what I'm talking about as a GM is allowing the players room to breathe and the time to rest and recuperate and recover. Now, this is also, as far as I'm concerned, a big opportunity for roleplay. Some of the greatest moments in some of the greatest campaigns I've ever done took place completely during downtime. So there was no active conflict. There wasn't always this ticking clock or sense of impending doom. There was moments where they could breathe. I liken it to The Lord of the Rings, where, the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, and basically they're having adventure after adventure after adventure, and they're under incredible stress and tension all the way until they escape Moria. Gandalf dies, spoiler alert, and they flee to Lothlorien, and there in Lothlorien, they can finally catch their breath, they can rest, they can recuperate. That's downtime. But in Lothlorien, the characters spend a lot of time with each other and with the elves and stuff, and they spend a lot of time developing their character based not on the statistics or the experience points they're expending to make their characters physically stronger or whatever. They're developing the character relationships in that time, and that for me in my games is just as important as the game system in terms of character development. Is the character development that the players are able to do during downtime. Again, not every table is going to find this of use. A lot of tables that are based purely around dungeon crawling, where, like Goodman Games used to say, and maybe still says, NPCs are just there to be killed, and dungeons are there to be raided, and monsters are there to be slaughtered, and their stuff is there for the taking. Maybe there's not a lot of value for, role-playing the character interactions during downtime in a game like that. But maybe there is too. Certainly if you even are running a dungeon crawl kind of game, you might want to experiment with having those moments of downtime to see what happens. Because character development is always good. It can only strengthen the players' bonds to their characters and to the bonds of the other characters at the table. So it's just, overall in my experience, it's been a net positive kind of thing to do. So yeah, downtime is pretty crucial, and use it as the opportunity that it is to flesh out those relationships. Another thought that I've had is that one of the things that I've done over the campaigns I've run is very often I try and make things personal for the player characters. So if they are in an encounter, a combat encounter, let's say, I'm going to see if there's anything in that combat encounter that I could use to tie in some aspect of the character's backstory or history that we've already developed previously in the campaign play. So, for example, let's say that the characters who are working for the City Watch, as I used in the previous example, have raided this thieves' lair, and there's a section of the thieves' lair that has like their treasure or some treasure chest or something like that. So I know in the backstory of one of these particular characters, let's say that the character had like a family heirloom, like a dagger or something that was really important to them that got stolen. So as the characters are raiding this thieves guild, I think, what if I put that very dagger inside the loot chest of the head of the thieves guild? So now when the player finds that, this is no longer just about City Watch taking down some scumbag thieves. This is now about that particular character going, oh, now I know who stole this. This chest belongs to the head of the Thieves Guild, and now I know I can suspect that he was responsible for doing this, so now I'm going to go after him. And it gives that character, once again, a new motivation, a new objective, which allows me to throw obstacles at him and create the conflict, and yada, yada, yada. It's nice to do that every now and then, to personalize things for the PCs, but you don't want to do too much of it. Because if you do too much of it, it becomes super contrived. Like every time they explore a new wilderness hex and they encounter a monster, resist the temptation to connect that monster and every other monster they encounter to the backstories of the characters, because it just gets too much. You want to treat making it personal almost like a strong spice you use in cooking. You don't want to use too much of it, because then it'll overwhelm the flavor of the meal. You want to use it just with sparing proportions, you might say, just to give a little taste here and there. But otherwise, making it personal can be a really valuable and useful tool in the old GM kit, I found, to connect the players with the game, with what's going on. They really feel like their characters are now part of this milieu, of this setting. And I found in my experience that, the more you can make players feel connected to their characters to the setting, the more they're going to want to come back to the table next week. So the next one is you want to keep yourself organized as a GM. Whether you're behind a screen at a table or behind a screen on a Roll20 or something like that. If you want to have the details to your fingertips of the kind of things you're going to need to know during the session. So this could be sort of a system thing, like if I'm running a Pathfinder game. A lot of the monsters have a lot of special abilities and stuff, so I want to have those right at my fingertips. So I want to organize myself behind my screen to have that immediately available to draw upon it. Or if you're running a really NPC heavy kind of game, like maybe you're doing like a court intrigue kind of campaign or something, you really want to have all of the names, at the very least the names and descriptions, basic descriptions of the major NPCs that the players might encounter that session at your fingertips, because the last thing you want to do is kill the pace of your game by having to flip through your notes or flip through a book or something. Nothing will kill the action of a scene greater than just hold on, guys. I gotta look this up. and then you look up and you see your players are on their phones or they're talking about, the football game last night or whatever, and then you've lost them. You can get them back, but it sucks to have to do that. So I like to try and keep myself organized. Now, everybody has a different idea of how to do this. Mine isn't particularly impressive or complicated. It just means that I have a piece of paper with basically rows and columns of the things I need to know. So let's say it's NPCs. I have a list of all the major NPCs that I know are sort of in the area. I have their names. I have a description of them. I have maybe some of their motivations. I did a video on this actually, which is linked up here, which was specifically talking about Vampire, the Masquerade, but it's just as applicable to any game when you're talking about NPCs. And you want to keep track of who the NPCs are and what they want and that stuff like that. Because I like to be able to jump into the NPC as quick as possible when I'm playing the NPC. I hate forgetting names of NPCs. It makes me feel like I'm not doing my job as a GM. It happens obviously sometimes, but a lot of GMs as well are very blessed to have players who take copious notes, and they very often will say, "Oh, if the GM's going, oh yeah, you run into what was his name again? The innkeeper from the Twin Blades Inn," and one of the players will say, "Oh yeah, that was Burton the one-eyed or something," and you go, "Oh yeah, right, thanks." But not all of us are blessed with those kind of players. I am currently with my in-person group, which is great, but not everybody is. So if you're not blessed with such players, you do want to make sure you keep yourself organized. And I would keep it simple, like if you're online or something, or you use a laptop, a lot of people use like OneNote or something like that. There's a million different ways you can do it to organize your world, your adventure, whatever. But whatever particular version of that you choose, just make sure it works for you and that you're able to master the system quick enough. Because again, the last thing you want to do is be, flipping through notes while your players are sitting there drumming their fingers going, okay, what's going on? You never want to have your players be bored if you can avoid it. So that's 5. I think I'm going to cut that there. I think I'll do a part 2 of this video coming up and do 5 more. But again, they were in no particular order. They're just things that I use to make my games better. But what do you think? Are these things that you've used before? Do you have ways you can build on these ideas, or do you have other things that I haven't mentioned? I'm sure you do. There's a million things I haven't mentioned, although I will mention other things very soon coming up in the part 2 of this video. But yeah, let me know if you have any thoughts on this and whether or not it was useful for you, because that's what I'm trying to do here, is to help you guys run better games whenever I possibly can. So thanks for joining me here today, and if you do want to help support the channel, you can join us over on Patreon or here on YouTube and become a channel member, or you can buy some handmade merchandise over at memyselfandI.com, or of course buying merchandise at DriveThruRPG through the links below in the description is a great way to support the channel as well. Other than that, I will see you at GenCon this August, and I will also see you on the next video here on Me, Myself, and I.